Welcome, brothers and sisters, as we honor the life of J. Shelley Fallon. I am Bishop Oakes. I'll be conducting. I'm joined on the stand by my counselors, Brother Richard and Brother Harris. For your information, the family prayer was given by Brian Now. I'd like to thank Sister Joan Golding for providing our prelude music today, and also Sister Jessie Sims will be our chorus. Our opening hymn will be hymn number 127, Does the Journey Seem Long?, after which Greg Ferry will offer our invocation.
Once again, we're grateful for this man, for the friend grandfather, the father, and the husband he was. Put your arms around him for us and give him just one extra tight squeeze. We're grateful for our Lord and Savior, for the knowledge that we have. We will meet again. We humbly say these things in his name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
We will now, our program will go as follows. We'll first have the live sketch by Trudy Besant, Renee Rees, and Whitley Beck. They will be followed by a musical selection by Cambria Allen, Families Can Be Together Forever. After which, Jay's daughter, Robin Ferry, will speak to us, and she will be followed by a musical selection by Madison Allen, Unchained Melody. We'll go with that.
So we wanted to, in the live sketch, hear the voice of the siblings with Renee Rees, his own children through myself, and then one of his grandchildren through Whitley Besant. But Renee, her husband, got sick Saturday, and so my daughter is going to be the voice of the siblings for Renee Rees. Nestled in the shadows of the majestic Mount Timpanogos Peak sits a little red brick house. Once upon a time, not really so long ago, there lived a loving mother named Fern Elizabeth and a hard-working father named Marvin Marion Allen. They had been blessed with two bright sons whose names were Marvin Lynn and Dale Thomas. On Saturday, June 1st, 1946, their family welcomed a new baby boy into their lives. He would be known as J. Shelley Allen. Later, two additional children would make their family complete: an energetic boy, Lee Howard, and a delightful girl named Renee Charlene. But it is Jay for whom we celebrate today. Jay was a free spirit who was not content to live a quiet life confined within the walls of his cozy home. He felt the pull of a greater purpose beckoning him beyond settling for an ordinary life. And so it was that he began a 76-year journey that would shape him into someone quite extraordinary.
At the beginning of each school year, or before starting a presentation that he had been invited to speak at, Grandpa would introduce himself by using hats. Each hat represented a different role from his life. Today, we will do the same.
This first hat represents Dad's growing up years. Dad was born on June 1st, 1946. He attended Forbes, Greenwood, and Harrington elementary schools, the old combined junior-senior high school that used to sit on the hill, and American Fork High School.
Jay loved the outdoors. From a very young age, when he was 3 or 4 years old, he would walk the 2 or 3 blocks from home to hang out at the frog pond to play in the water. Grandpa grew up with an acre garden. When he was 5 years old, his dad let him work in the garden with him. Grandpa would sit on their old workhorse named Old Red, while his dad cultivated the rows. Then his dad gave him a small part of it for his own garden. Being able to plant and care for whatever he wanted was the beginning of a lifelong love for gardening. In an interview with Jay, he said, "When I was 5 years old, life got tough for me. It was a wonder he became a teacher. Mom would drive him to Forbes Elementary, she'd drop him off at the front door, Jay would run right out the back door. After running a few errands on her way home, Mom would find Jay there to greet her. He did this several times before she finally asked him why. He responded, "I don't like those alphabetties."
Dad was a bit mischievous. As a child, Grandma Ellen had beautiful glass bulbs on her Christmas tree, and Dad and his brothers didn't see ornaments on that tree. They saw a challenge. Once Grandma left the house, they would pull out their pea shooters. Now, they were very strategic about which bulbs they shot, and how many, so as not to shoot too many to create barren branches or that she would notice. It was also very important to have everything in place and cleaned up before Grandma returned.
Grandpa told this story of getting thumped on the head at school by his teacher for misbehaving. When he got home, he told his dad what had happened. He thought his dad would take pity on him. Instead, his dad said, "So let me see if I got this correct. You said your teacher thumped you on the head like this?" His dad proceeded to thump him on the head to demonstrate. "Yes," cried Grandpa, "just like that." That day, Grandpa learned that if he ever got thumped at school by his teacher, he would get thumped twice when he got home. Jay was a jokester. Since he was much older than me, my friends and I were the target of many of his tricks. For example, Jay told my friends, "I will flush one of you down the toilet," at which point he grabbed poor Linnell Fox and held her upside down over the toilet. Then he pushed the door shut to the horror of the rest of my friends. We stood transfixed in the hallway, not knowing what to do. Behind the closed door, he carefully set Linnell in the bathtub, where she couldn't be seen, then immediately flushed the toilet and opened the door. My friends screamed and ran away, believing he had actually done it. Linnell was gone.
One final story to help you understand the mischievous nature of my dad was his first car accident. It went something like this. One day he and his friends somehow and for whatever reason ended up in a car headed for Alpine. None of them were old enough to drive yet, and his friend who was actually driving wasn't tall enough to hit the gas pedal and see over the dashboard at the same time. So he would push the gas, then look up real quick to see where he was going. Things went well for quite a while until they hit the stretch of road just above Shelley Elementary, where the old red corrals used to be. His friend was pressing on the gas when they got to the big curve. Let's just say the cows got a big scare that day.
Grandpa was a natural leader and had several accomplishments during his high school years. He was the junior class president, Sterling Scholar in Music, and the drum major for the American Fork High School Marching Band under the direction of Mr. Hunter. Grandpa would say that back in his day, if you didn't play your instrument well, then you were asked to be the drum major. During his senior year, Grandpa and the 100-member band represented the state of Utah at the Calgary Stampede. In high school, Jay was very busy. In addition to his classwork, he had extracurricular activities. He was a disc jockey for the youth community dances that were held in the basement of the tabernacle. He also ran the old station wagon ambulance around town on the weekends when he was 17. His ambulance driving days provided many stories to share in his classes.
It was also during Dad's junior year in 1963 that he was picking beans at the welfare farms. He saw a girl that he thought he knew. Being a silly teenager that he was, he walked up behind her and gave her a solid swat on her bottom. I would have loved to have seen the shocked look on both of their faces. When, as Dad realized his mistake, he had no idea who this girl was. And my mom, who was also a junior in high school and had just moved from Palmyra, Utah to American Fork, had no idea why she had just gotten spanked. Quite the first impression. They were married about 5 years later on August 16, 1968.
Grandpa Jay graduated from American Fork High School in 1964 and attended BYU as a pre-med student for 4.5 years. In the end, he majored in zoology and minored in botany.
Dad worked for Timpanogos Cave for 51 years, and this hat represents that time period from about 1968 to 2019. He was looking for summer work in the final years of college. He had 3 interviews, one with the Forest Service, one with Fish and Wildlife, and one with the National Park Service. In the end, he chose the National Park Service. This decision changed the direction of his life. He decided he would not pursue medical school. However, since working at the cave was only a seasonal position, he would need another job for the rest of the year. Dad's high school biology teacher and cousin, Arlo Shelley, worked at the cave, and he seemed to be getting along okay. So Dad went back and got his teaching certificate before he graduated from BYU.
So this is Madison's memory of Grandpa. One of my favorite things about Grandpa was all the knowledge that he shared with me. When we went hiking up to the cave, he would talk about all the plants and what their specific names were and a little fact about them. He would always talk about different stops on the trail and explain why it was called that name. He taught me so much about Tim Cave and shared the story about the heart of the cave. He was the one to teach me how to fish and how to prepare the fish for cooking. He taught me how to juice and can tomatoes and how to make his salsa. He taught me how to make jerky. He also taught me a lot about gardening. He was my teacher and my loving grandpa. I will miss him coming to my house to tell me what he learned that day so that he could teach me.
Jay loved the mountain terrain, the morning hikers, the rangers, and the seasons. Jay said that there was no better job on the earth than to come to Timpanogos Cave, hike the trail, meet people, and go in the cave to cool off every day. His greatest reward was seeing people's faces light up when they learned new things.
Dad loved the walking stick that Mac gave him with the cave system engraved in it. He joked that he was sure that Mac gave it to him because he was the old man on the hill, and Mac was afraid that Dad would get lost in the cave. But now, all he had to do was look at the cave to find his way out again.
This is Jackson's memory of Grandpa. I love going to the cave with Grandpa. He would always make it a good time with all the stories he would tell. One particular time I remember very well is when we loaded up water guns with chemicals to treat an infestation on the roof of the cave in the camel room.
Dad made so many lasting friendships during his years at the cave. Friends that he not only worked with, but visited and played with. Each ranger was part of his family. He loved to greet and visit the morning hikers. They were a bright spot in his day. They made him feel like a celebrity. He loved to laugh and was the instigator of many cave pranks.
Okay, this is Devin's memory of Grandpa. I remember volunteering as a bat at the Timpanogos Cave National Monument with Grandpa. Grandpa easily gave the best tours the caves have ever seen in their long history. My favorite part is when he would shine a laser pointer into the facets of someone's diamond ring inside the big room, and countless beams of light would shoot out everywhere.
This hat represents the 46 years Dad taught school. He worked with thousands of students from 1968 to 2014. Dad started his teaching career at American Fork Junior High. He taught health and pre-algebra there for 1 year. The following year, he moved to the high school where he taught from 1969 to 2014. The subjects he taught were health, pre-algebra, algebra, biology, zoobotany, human biology, and bioethics.
During his teaching years, he also participated in various faculty assignments. One was to run the clock for all the home basketball and football games. This is Dakota's memory of Grandpa. The memory I cherish the most is the football games he would always take us to. We always had to check the greenhouse before the game and then visit his classroom. I will always cherish his love for nature. And then Dustin's memory is one of my favorite memories with Grandpa was going to high school events when we were kids, getting to sit in the announcer's box before and after the game, going into the school and getting lemon heads. One day, Grandpa gave me one of the dead frogs and grasshoppers to take home, which I promptly placed next to the kitchen sink. After games, we would go to JCW's drive-thru and Grandpa would order our ice cream and then make us search the ashtray and cup holders to find change.
Dad was asked to be a chaperone at many of the school dances. As a little girl, I was his date on some of these occasions. He was the perfect date.
Just as his classroom was filled with creatures, later in life, our house was too. One was a boa constrictor. He let run loose in our house. I remember one night it was wrapped around the fireplace log holder. They could not get it uncoiled. He said, "We will just leave it alone. It will come out tonight." What? Oh, there's one. But the mama tarantula was the worst. You know, they carry their babies on their backs. Tons of little ones. He would let it crawl around like that and then put it back in the case, saying, "I hope she got all her little babies back on her back." Are you kidding?
Okay, this is Mikkel's memory. In one of my classes in high school, I had to collect a bunch of insects. One day, as we were coming down from collecting in American Fork Canyon, we saw a big black tarantula in the middle of the road. My dad said we needed to catch it. Maybe I'd get extra credit for it. And of course, we needed to show Grandpa. The entire way to Grandpa's house, I sang, "I'm bringing home a great big tarantula. Won't my Grandpa be so proud of me?" Grandpa did not let me down. He was proud. He had to take a picture and post it on Facebook. Grandpa had a love of spiders. We were never allowed to kill them, especially those barking ones. I didn't inherit that one, or that love.
I asked Mom, what was his deal with tarantulas? Every year he had a tarantula. And as I was looking this morning on his Facebook page, I happened upon, I couldn't remember the lesson behind the tarantula, but it was overcoming the fear of the unknown. That once you learn about things, then you're not living in fear. Okay, yes, we always had unusual animals at our house. Having all these animals around caused some interesting learning opportunities. We all felt absolutely terrible the day we left the tarantula jar out in the sun all day and killed it. Dad made us feel horrible about that one, as he impressed on our little minds how the poor spider had slowly baked to death. On another occasion, I was with my friends in our basement. We decided to go outside to play instead. However, to our absolute horror, there coiled on the bottom step of our house was a huge snake. I jumped over it and ran out the door onto the carport, screaming and crying as if someone had just been killed, while my friends remained trapped in the basement. It turns out it was just one of those snakes Dad had brought home from school and gotten out of its case.
Jay was the person that was called to handle medical emergencies at the high school. He loved using his paramedic skills no matter where he was. One day I was walking past his favorite little white Beetle Bop car. Two sharp prongs were sticking out and cut a 5-inch gash in my leg to the bone. He ran in the house and immediately came out with just the right miscellaneous items to keep my leg from bleeding and to hold it shut until the ambulance came. The paramedics were amazed. Maybe that is why he was recommended for his job on the ambulance crew in the first place.
It wasn't always medical emergencies that Grandpa handled. He also treated many headaches and menstrual cramps using his pressure point pillows. Students would come to him like he was the school nurse.
All 4 of us kids were in Dad's class at the high school. We remembered the basics, news articles, dissecting the fetal pigs, guest speakers, and of course Tarantula Day. But there was also the bee dance, the walking field trip to the ginkgo biloba tree, working in the school garden, and the final exam on the 5 Senses Nature Trail in the canyon. He was always trying to make learning interesting and memorable, but not all of his lessons went according to plan. One time, when he was going to start class, he pretended to slip and hit his head on the edge of the metal cart, the teaching cart he had in the front of the room. When he stood up, he was holding his forehead where the students could see the blood, which was ketchup he'd had in his hand. Well, on this particular occasion, one of the students was too fast. He couldn't catch her. She was already halfway to the office yelling for help. After that one, he always let the office know when he was having a lesson like that.
Jay not only influenced thousands of students' lives, he was a mentor and friend to other teachers, faculty members, and administrators. He was always willing to offer suggestions, provide a listening ear, or offer encouragement or assistance.
Ever since I was really small, I wanted to grow up, and I wanted to be in Grandpa's class. My older brother got to, so did my mom and her siblings. I was just 2 years behind my brother in school, and Grandpa had already officially retired, but taught one class. In 2013, the principal asked Grandpa how long he was going to stay at the high school. Grandpa told the principal about my dream to be in his class. The principal said, "Well, I guess you've got to stay at least one more year." True to his words, Grandpa's last year was 2014, and he did say it was his best year.
This hat represents Dad's contribution to his community and country.
During the late 60s and early 70s, Jay enlisted in the Army. He spent 6 years serving his country. He began as part of the Pleasant Grove Army Reserve Unit. However, they needed more members in the Provo unit. He volunteered to switch. This decision turned out to be a tender mercy. About 1 month later, he was transferred. The Pleasant Grove unit was sent to Vietnam for active combat.
Grandpa was fascinated with mining in American Fork Canyon. He spent much time researching all there was to learn about it and created a memorable presentation to teach people visiting Utah, members of the community, and many school children about the mining, as he dressed up as George Ting and told the mining stories. He even received permission to be buried there, but he wanted Grandma to come visit him.
Dad's life was in American Fork. The only time he lived outside of American Fork was a few years when he was in college, but he was quick to return home. He and my mom built their home in 1972. It was the first home that was built in that subdivision. Dad said that when he was asked which lot he wanted, he said the third one. He had grown up on a corner and didn't want that again.
Jay was always looking for additional ways to financially provide for his family. Neil Savage was in his ward. One day, Dad was talking to him about the Savage Brothers trucks. At that time, they were looking for night drivers to take coal to the LDS hospital and cement down south on the weekends. For the next 6 years, he worked evenings and weekends for Savage Brothers.
In 2015, Grandpa was the Grand Marshal for the American Fork Still Day celebration. In typical Grandpa fashion, he rode with his entire family on a trailer driven by Brian in the Savage Brothers truck. We joked that in the pictures of this event, there's Grandpa taking pictures of all the people watching the parade. Grandpa always had his camera and was always taking pictures. We have numerous pictures of Grandpa taking pictures.
Dad always had his scanners going, listening to what was happening in the community. Whenever there was an emergency call, he was on his way to see what was going on.
One of our family sayings is, "Are we taking a Jaybird trip?" What is a Jaybird trip, you ask? Well, anytime you would go anywhere with Jay, it always ended up taking 2 to 3 times longer than expected, because he would have to stop to talk to someone here, or stop there to get something, or make a quick stop to check something.
Several years ago, while building the ice castles in Midway, Brett Christensen noticed this guy walking around the perimeter taking pictures, like every day. He said, "Eventually I went out and talked to him." It was, of course, Jay. He was there so often that we eventually gave him a company coat. He became probably our greatest ambassador ever. He adopted us all as his family. He regularly brought his beef jerky to liberally hand out. I'm so blessed to have known him. Grandpa was proud to work with several of his grandchildren at the ice castles.
This hat represents the other hobbies that Dad enjoyed.
When my cousins came from different places, they would all congregate around Jay, who would take them out in nature, probably riding his toco. He was everyone's favorite. When his cousins weren't around, he was always up riding the toco up the canyon around the mines. Jay had many different motorcycles, which he would ride, but his old Kawasaki motorcycle with the orange Home Depot bucket attached to the back was an icon. In 2000, he bought his dream motorcycle, his Harley Davidson.
This is Jordan's memory of Grandpa. Anytime I was able to go up AF Canyon with Grandpa were my best memories. Whether it was spending a whole summer waking up early and hiking up to the cave to help with tours, or later in life when he was on his Harley. The one that sticks out the most to me is when we moved back from Texas. Grandpa was so excited we were home. Within a week, we were both on our bikes riding up AF Canyon, stopping at Pine Hollow Lookout to get a picture of him and his Harley with the snow-covered mountains of Timpanogos in the background. Every time I ride up there now, I'll remember how slow he took the canyon roads, admiring all the beauty and nature that comes with it.
Dad loved plants. He said that they didn't talk back to him and they didn't hurt him. He just loved to talk to them to help them grow. He would spray my fruit trees, soak my peas just the right amount before I planted them, and make sure I made it to Fuchsia's Saturday at Smith's every year. I'm pretty sure he drove the gardeners crazy up there with how many questions. In the last 2 years, he had mastered growing onions, but his absolute favorite flower was the lupin.
This is Caleb's memory of Grandpa. He always loved teaching us and took every moment he could to do so. For example, as the season to plant peas and tomatoes in the little garden we had on the side of our yard arrived, he would come and teach us the proper way to plant them using all the special substances to give them the proper nourishment and finish with the perfect amount of water to quench its thirst.
Jay loved our yearly trips to Yellowstone to go fishing. I always wished that we'd go somewhere else on vacation after the first few years, but he loved it. Maybe that is where his love for fishing and the outdoors began.
This is Cambry's memory of Grandpa. My favorite memory with Grandpa is when we would wake up early to go fishing. I would grab my Barbie pole and my snack lunch on my way out of the house and get into his truck. When we would get to the tunnel in Provo Canyon, he would always wake up the fish gods by honking 3 times so they would let us catch some good ones. Once we got to Strawberry, I always managed to fall asleep in the boat. On the way home, I would always ask for a piece of juicy fruit gum. Then, if we were lucky, Grandpa would stop at Maverick to get his hot dog and salt and vinegar chips. Zachary's memory: whenever we went fishing with Grandpa, we would always stop by Maverick at the same Maverick on the way home. He would get gas station hot dogs, salt and vinegar potato chips, and slushies. He would sit on the same bench and talk about the day. Taylor's memory: one time, Grandpa and I were going fishing, and we were at Deer Creek, but on the back side where no one goes, there was this quicksand mud pit thing that looked like regular ground, and I started to walk in it. I got stuck and was slowly sinking. Grandpa didn't want to get stuck too. He said I'd have to get myself out. I was mad the whole way home.
Dad had all kinds of interests. He was a beekeeper for a time, a 1-year turkey farmer. He spent a lot of time with his best friend Keith Johnson at the meat farm or at his ranch.
The Allen family was a hunting family, and every fall you could find a prize deer hanging in the garage. After they would come in and cook the liver, then clean the guns. Oops. One of those brothers forgot to take out the bullet, and yes, the gun went off, and the bullet whizzed past Mom into the kitchen wall. Wouldn't be the last bullet hole.
Speaking of hunting trips and guns going off, Dad was cleaning his gun in the kitchen of our house one day. This time the barrel was facing down to the floor when it went off. The bullet went down through the floor and nearly hit Mom, who was in the basement under folding clothes in the laundry room. We have lots of deer hunting memories. One in particular, it was Jason's favorite. That didn't have to do with hunting deer per se, but they found some beer bottles somewhere, and they proceeded to shoot them, used them as target practice, but then Dad got worried that maybe someone had seen them, and the dog had lapped up the beer from the broken bottles, and so he was kind of drunk. So he was afraid that someone was going to see them and was worried about it, so he made Mom go to Kohler's to buy some more beer to put it back where it was, just to make things right.
Braden's memory of Grandpa. Some of my fondest memories include fishing trips to Captain's Hole with Velveeta cheese as bait, spending summer days with him at Tim Cave, dissecting pigs in his biology class, planting and juicing tomatoes, sampling his perfected jerky and crab salad recipes, visiting him at the ice castles, remowing the lawn multiple times to make sure it was exactly right, catching too many fish at Strawberry Lake while freezing our butts off, and getting a random phone call on our honeymoon to Cancun because he heard the news that an American tourist had been hurt.
Jay would often drop by the house to have Mom cook him a hamburger, but what he loved the most was her potato salad. Jay eventually perfected some recipes of his own, his famous jerky, crab salad, and salsa, to name a few. Many family members were asked to sample different tartar and fish sauce recipes until he got the fish sandwich just right.
This hat represents Dad's family life as a father and grandfather. Dad had a style of teaching at school. He also had a style of disciplining or teaching his children at home, which was much more effective than any lecture ever could be. For example, Jason learned that when the consequences for being late for curfew, Dad would call or yell at him. When midnight came, he would just drag Mom out of the house, and they would go get the car that was parked outside his girlfriend's house, drive it home, leaving Jason stranded. On another occasion, Jason was playing video games, the old Atari, when he got a little upset and threw the paddle, which accidentally hit me in the head. Of course, I went screaming upstairs, and Jason was still playing when Dad came down the stairs and asked, "What in the world did you do?" "Trudy's up there passed out." So Jason went up to investigate, and he asked me, because when we were reminiscing, he's like, "Trudy, did you really pass out? Because your leg was twitching when I went up there." I don't remember. Now, as for me, the punishment was the look.
Which, by the way, she has the same look.
It affected me. Dad had this way of looking at you that I can't entirely describe, but when he was disappointed, or when you disappointed, or he was disappointed in you, the look made you feel as though you had let him down in the absolute worst possible way, and his heart was now shattered to pieces. He would never be the same again. I would have rather listened to a lecture or be spanked than to get that look. Let me give you an example of this conversation we had once. It went something like this. "Dad, I have something to ask you, but please just don't give me the look." He chuckled and said, "What look?" "I'm telling you, I never wanted to face that look."
One afternoon, Jay found out that a portable bungee jump had arrived in town next to the Harts parking lot. This sounded interesting to him, so he went down to check it out. He decided it was something he'd like to try. He paid the required amount and climbed the ladder to the top. Once there, he must have realized his mistake. He was afraid of heights. He couldn't do it. The workers there decided he would need a little extra encouragement, so they said, "Okay, Jay, We are going to count down from 5. Then when we get to 0, you need to jump. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, nothing. Jay was terrified. Long story short, by the time Jay finally did jump, there was quite a crowd on the ground cheering him on.
Grandpa said that he never trained his children to say I love you. And that since he hadn't taught them this, they didn't do it. He decided he would implement Pavlov's classical conditioning with his grandchildren. Whenever he would say, I love you, he would respond, goody, goody, goody. So when I walked into the class the first day, and I said, I love you, Mr. Allen, and he responded, goody, 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 my classmates were shocked. They had no idea he was my grandpa. And then they proceeded to do that every time they would walk into class.
Over the years, Dad had many projects. But the thing with Dad's projects is they would be family projects, like making fire starters by the fireplace to sell, husking corn, picking up limbs from pruned trees. In fact, when I got married, I was absolutely dumbfounded when my husband went out and fixed our car without asking me to come out and hold the flashlight for him once. I didn't think that was even possible. But I believe that since Dad was gone a lot of the time, he took advantage of every opportunity to have his kids with him.
You may have heard the saying that lightning never hits the same place twice. Well, one spring evening, Jay was with his family watching his oldest son play baseball at JC Ballpark when a storm rolled in. 1 minute things were fine, the next thing there was a boom and 3 people were down. The umpire on the field had been hit in the head and flipped onto his back. A woman walking to her car carrying her aluminum chair was hit in the hip, and Jay had been hit in the arm. Miraculously, they all survived.
This is Mackenzie's memory of Grandpa. One of my favorite memories of Grandpa is when I was younger, we would sit on his swing in the front yard and sing the swinging song. It was simple, but it was something that I always looked forward to doing when I would go to their house.
Dad was a really good storyteller. I remember as a child walking up with him up the old dirt road to the haystacks, where we would sit under the stars and he would tell us stories. I just love that memory.
On many occasions, Jay brought wild cats home from Keith's Ranch for his grandkids. He even ended up with one. He even ended up with one named Tiger because it liked us better than the Besant kids because we actually fed it. Yeah, that was my cat.
This is JD's memory of Grandpa. Grandpa Allen was a great example for me. One of the funniest memories I had with him was when we were driving. I was in the middle seat in the front of his truck and the police passed by. Grandpa said, "Duck!" I was confused. So when I got home, I asked my mom, "What does duck mean?" I loved all our fishing trips and fun times we had together. I got to work at the ice castles and had the funnest times with him. He taught me all there is to know about how to fish and was always willing to hang out with me. Through all the fun memories and jokes, he was a great, loving, and caring grandpa to me.
Each year, Dad would take the 4 of us and whoever else wanted to go that year to hike the mountain, Mount Timpanogos. We would drop off a car on the Aspen Grove side of Provo Canyon the night before, then hike up the Timpanuki side in the morning. This way we had a way down and we got to hike down in the shadows of the evening. Well, there was one year when Dad was beside himself with worry because Robin kept stumbling and Brian was looking around not watching where he was walking. So he had a rope in his pack. He tied it around his waist, then he tied it around Brian, and then Robin. I think he started to do the same thing the following year, when it finally dawned on him that if one of them fell, they were all gone. A little more. I will never forget the couple of times, the last few times we hiked that mountain, he literally crawled on his hands and knees across the catwalk.
So this is my memory of my grandpa, one of many, but Grandpa Jay was always worried about everything and anyone and everyone. There were countless nights he didn't sleep because he was worried about one of us, our plans or something else. We used to joke that he was going to die of a heart attack from all his worrying. It's a tradition in our family to go to Bear Lake each year. I loved the glow stick parade. I remember getting up early to make sure that we had a spot at the beach. But what I remember most is the wave runners. Grandpa would sit us all down and go over all the rules of the wave runner. One of the rules was that you had to stay 150 feet away from everyone. And he literally sat on the beach with his binoculars, making sure everyone was 150 feet away. One year I was trying to splash my cousin and his friends, and I lost control of the wave runner and hit into them. And as I made my way back to the beach, I was dreading facing Grandpa because I knew he would be mad. And that was the last year Grandpa told us the rules. He decided we needed to turn that responsibility over to Jason, and he would just sit there on the beach and worry.
Then there was the shock collar. I'll tell this one. One year, Brian brought up his shock collar for his dog. Grandpa was curious about how it worked, so we all watched as he put the mechanism on next to his throat and gave a timid little bark. Well, he didn't feel much. He figured it couldn't be that bad and let out a hearty bark. His reaction would have won the AFB Video of the Year if he'd actually sent it in. Jason reminded us of a time when we all sat in the car, packed. It was packed and ready to go to Lagoon, but we had to wait for Brian to go finish the mowing the lawn when he was supposed to get done. See, Dad was a hard worker, and we were expected to do likewise. But he also appreciated others who were hard workers. He would leave a Coke can, a full can, Coke, not a Coke can, a full Coke on the garbage can for the garbage truck drivers. One day he saw the missionaries walking by and had them come choose a bag of chips and would just chat with them.
In life growing up, everywhere I went, I would try to tell people who I was, but all I had to say was, I'm Jay Allen's sister. Oh yes, we know Jay, he's amazing. I have to admit, I was a little jealous of his popularity, but I am so proud to say to you today, I am Jay Allen's sister.
This is Briley's memory with Grandpa. Grandpa was at my house the day I learned to ride my bike, my pink bike. I wanted to quit. It was hard and I had fallen a lot, but Grandpa told me to keep trying. I got better and better the more I rode. About a week later, when Grandpa stopped by, I got my bike to show him how I could ride. He said, "Good job, you are getting so good." This made me proud. I always loved showing Grandpa different things because he always encouraged me and made me better.
The last 2 years since Jay retired from the cave and COVID hit, Jay and Linda have finally had time to reconnect. They enjoyed trips to the doctor appointments and the opportunity to work together as they taught the Valiant 10 class in primary.
It is clear to see that Grandpa's example had a great influence on his family. Jason is a respiratory therapist. Grandpa was drawn to all things medical. Trudy is an elementary school librarian. Grandpa loved teaching. Robin is a nurse. Again, he was drawn to the medical side of things and people. Brian works for UDOT, overseeing Provo Canyon. Grandpa loved the mountains.
Dad put on his final hat today. On September 26, on the morning of September 26, 2022, when he quietly slipped through the bell into Grandma Allen's loving arms. Although this part of Jay's story has come to an end, let's not forget how it all began. For nestled in the shadows of that majestic mountain, Pinogus Peak, behind that little red brick house, stands a distinct apple tree. This is a special tree. It's one of Jay's most beloved trees. Through the years, he grafted and nourished it with care. In return, the tree offered delicious fruit for all to eat. Each of us is like that cherished tree. His lessons and memories have been grafted into each of us. Just like a graft to a tree adds strength and variety, our lives have become enriched and more substantial because we were taught and loved by Jay. We love you, Dad.
Goody, goody, goody.
still trip. Yes, I do. My dad carried me down the mountain more times than you can imagine. I am Robin. I am Jay and Linda's third daughter. And the one who Dad thought would be a great idea to let his biology class name. I'm grateful they were merciful. In preparation for speaking today, which I joked with our family as we were all together that we are all introverts. The only extrovert in this family is right here. But I know he's proud and he's enjoying every minute of this today. But as I was preparing for my talk today, I was trying to think of how I would start. And I kind of went through and thought of all of Dad's accomplishments, magnified by all the letters and comments that people left on his Facebook for us. I had no idea the man that he was. I really didn't. But the word I have for Dad is remarkable. I'm glad I didn't use extraordinary because Trudy got that one. But he was a remarkable man. And sometimes in death we learn more about people than we did in life. The last week of Dad's life, we obtained permission from he and Mom to post on his Facebook because there have been so many people reaching out wondering why Dad hadn't posted anything. To share Dad's diagnosis and encourage people to share their loving memories, stories, and happy things that we could actually take the time to read to Dad as he was too weak to get out of the house. And Devin and I sat with him, and I'm sure actually other siblings too, sat with him in the living room. And as we read through the stories, we enjoyed hearing about all the adventures and journeys he had had with so many friends, family members, students, colleagues, and more. I was amazed at how many lives Dad touched in one way or another, but honestly, I asked Mom, and I think everyone was there, I said, how did Dad have the energy for that? Because we had no idea when he'd come home and take his little cat nap after being at the cave or being at school that he was going to be off helping somebody else. Dad didn't ring his own bell. He never told us where he was going. We just found out after. And she said he was a tired man, which honestly surprised me. Dad, like I said, would come home and have his midday cat nap and then head off with more energy than I'd ever seen anyone carry. I don't think Dad had that energy on his own. I think that Dad was guided to the people who needed him most. And it became very apparent last night at the viewing, and Dad's students come through, and so many expressed their appreciation for Dad and how he had led them. They were going down a path that wasn't in their favor, I should say, and Dad would tell them to come to his classroom. And he was their safe haven, something we did not know. How many children he protected outside of his own. Yes, I am the crier. As an adult, actually as a child, my dad kind of drove me nuts a little bit because I was very much a free spirit. And I think he recognized that at an early age. I was a little dreamer and I just wanted to be out wandering. Mom would try and send me out the door in clothing rather than a bathing suit because I thought that was appropriate for my neighborhood play. But Dad always just loved me how I was, and no matter how I looked, he would put me on his motorcycle and take me with him on his projects or whatever, probably just to keep me safe. But as an adult, when I look back at time with Dad, I feel like he kept me close to him intentionally. I feel like he held on to me a little bit tighter. Not because he loved me more than my siblings, but because Dad recognized that I was the free spirit that he was. And he knew that he had to keep me grounded. Though he actually never grounded me. That was a punishment to him if he grounded me, because he was stuck with me. Am I pouting? Excuse me, I have to catch up here. Dad was a wanderer, as was I. We would be out exploring our adventures and meeting new friends. Mom often joked that I would bring home the strays, the stray people and the stray animals. And I honestly can say that so did Dad. Dad just didn't bring the strays home, he just brought the animals home, and he took care of the people outside of our home. Two prime examples of Dad keeping me on track. And I was kind of looking at the stories that Trudy shared, and he has so many great stories, but I kind of wanted to focus a little bit on, because I feel like I could have easily been one of those troubled students that he was looking for, because school was not my interest ever. I never wanted to be in a building sitting down. So, when I was a student at American Fork High School, of course I took Dad's class, and I was also his TA, which he encouraged. And miraculously, every time I would get my schedule, for the entire 3 years I was at American Fork High School, I had Jay Allen's class, or I was his TA first period. Yeah. I assure you that I didn't have anything to do with that, nor was changing my schedule negotiable. I jokingly refer to Dad as the godfather of the district, and he was like some mafia kingpin to rule over me, because I was that rebellious teen. As I mentioned earlier, Dad was always spending time with us when he was free. One of our favorite things to do with Dad was go, as mentioned, to the Friday night football games. And if he didn't have a football game or a basketball game that he had to run the clock, he would take us up skiing at Brighton, night skiing. However, I recall vividly, we would go up on the nights that it would be snowing. And the silence of the big fluffy snowflakes that they created as they would fall, as they fell to the ground, with the fresh powder, Dad and I would ski down the mountain together. The massive lights above the slopes would make the snow glisten, and the dead silence, all we could hear was the two of us. Dad never said a word. He just followed behind me to ensure my safety and pick up my skis. He was always afraid I was going to lose my skis in the powder, as if he'd ever find them. But those nights were so memorable. And then our drives home, Dad would take the long way. Usually he would take me skiing, and then he'd take the long way home, making me stop everywhere with him, because somehow my dad knew that I had made secret plans with some group of friends and boys, and he wasn't about to let me get there, even though he never called me out on it. He just kept me away. And after hearing his story of how he met my mom, which I didn't know, now I know why. As I mentioned earlier also, Dad kept us close. Dad mastered pretty much everything he did, and all he cared about with us was that we achieved our goals and actually made a purpose in someone else's life as well. Dad wanted successful children, but success was defined very differently for each one of us, as you can see. Dad had the ability to make everyone he met feel as though you were the only person in the room. He would take the time to inquire details about you and remember them. And as we were reading the stories to him and the awesome messages that came in, Dad would lay there with his eyes closed because he was too weak to stay awake. And when I would come across a familiar name, I would pause. And Dad would sit with me too, and I would pause because I was sobbing. And Dad would open one eye, and I'd catch him looking at me, and then he'd hurry and close them because he knew I wanted to be strong for him. Even in death, Dad kept us strong and supported us. But I asked him to, and this is for everyone, if he would share or add to the stories that were coming in while he could, he would actually remember every single one of them and add detail while he could. As Dad grew weaker over the week, as I mentioned, Devin and I would sit and chat with him. And like I said, my other siblings would come and go. We all got to spend time with Dad, which we're super grateful for. But he also, every time I would stop reading, and if I wasn't crying, Devin and I would look at each other and be like, okay, I think Dad's asleep, let's let him sleep. And he'd open that eye again. We had one that was really working so great, and he'd open that eye and say, I'm not asleep, keep reading. Because it lifted his heart so much. And the only tears Dad cried were in response to us. He achieved everything he needed to in this life, and I think he knew that. I think Dad knew long before we did that his time was limited, but he wasn't going to let us slow him down. The word legacy is a word that has come up many times, and one that I've pondered long before even finding out about Dad's illness. I thought a legacy was just a family. I thought it was what a parent teaches their children and sends us out on our way. I was completely incorrect. Dad's legacy lives on, not only through us, his biological children, but the thousands of adopted children. He shared his passion for education and the sciences and encouraging all to become the best you possibly can. Dad was truly a friend and a mentor to all who encountered him. Excuse me. Jason told me that my talk would be long enough because I would fill the paragraphs with lots of tears, which made me laugh, and I appreciate that. Dad was always a guardian. He stood tall, he worked hard. He supported his family and loved us with every fiber of his being. We were his reason, we were his why. And he made sure we knew it. The past few weeks, roles reversed. Dad can no longer be the guardian. He wanted to. As his body grew rapidly more frail, I am so grateful for the opportunity I had to be at his bedside, all of us to be at his bedside, that I got to provide the care to Dad, which I needed to for me. Dad encouraged me to get through school. We shared so many stories of the ICU, and he loved hearing the treatment plans and how we took care of people. And now it was my turn to take care of Dad. Of course, along with all of my awesome siblings, which I'm also grateful for. I am honored to be a part of Dad's bedside care, as we all are, something I will treasure forever. I'm also grateful for the transparency that comes with the process of death. As Dad grew closer to the end of his life, he let us see his big heart shining through, even brighter. I never saw my dad cry. Yes, I've seen him tear up. But in his last days, Dad let us see the tears roll down his cheeks. And his big warm heart showed through. I assure you, Dad was not crying for himself. He was having empathy for us, those he was leaving behind. He never wanted to hurt us or see us in pain. The night Dad let us take him to the hospital, Jason and I got to go with him. And when the doctor came in and told us that told Dad that he had metastatic cancer, I'll never forget the look on his face when he looked at Jason and I. And I'm so grateful I had that opportunity there, Jason. It wasn't one of self-pity. It was a little shocked, but he just took it and went with it. He did stutter for a minute. Jason had to exit and do a ringing treatment, and I stepped out to grab something and come back in. And only then did I see Dad crying. And again, not crying for himself, crying for Mom. He wanted us to take care of her. I put down Dad's side rail. I held him tight. And I assured him that Mom would be fine. And then we proceeded to have a conversation that I honestly will cherish forever but never share. Seeing Dad in this state of mind was one of the most touching experiences, and I'm truly grateful that I had that with my brother too. When I speak of Dad as a guardian, I have to tell a story that my husband shared that actually made me laugh, and not at the time. I'll tell you that. As we know, Dad was an avid fisherman, and I worked many years night shift in the ICU, so Dad and Craig would take the boys fishing. Our youngest son, Devin, was nonverbal. He didn't speak, he signed. And apparently the group of them, the three boys and Dad and Craig, were out fishing at Deer Creek. And all of a sudden they were having a great time, usually listening to some music, talking, and all of a sudden, this is a classic line that our whole family knows. Craig says, "Where's Devin?" And I think everybody in our family knows they've heard that line before, "Where's Devin?" They're in the boat, and Devin's not in the boat. No sooner had Craig said that Grandpa swept down and grabbed Devin out of the water as he was going back towards the prop. He had fallen out the bow of the boat. Dad truly was a guardian. They both got in trouble for that, by the way. I was very mad that they weren't keeping an eye on him. But Devin he didn't scream. He never screamed. He just signed. So he was just drifting by and Dad grabbed him. Dad would always try and get any of us to go out fishing on the lake or on the river. Another story about fishing that will actually, hopefully everybody enjoys. We were fishing at Strawberry with Dad, and he always cautioned everybody to hold on to your gear. And of course, my kids were typical boys bouncing around the boat, being kind of obnoxious like they are. And Grandpa had had about enough of it, and he actually said his way of telling everybody to pay attention was hold on to your poles. Told all of my boys to hold their poles. No sooner had Dad said that his favorite fishing pole shot straight up and out the back of our boat as if a shark had taken off with it. And Craig even tried to come around and catch the pole, but it was gone. Sometimes Dad, he would caution us, but yet he would be the one who was making the mistakes. We did try and catch it, like I said, but to no avail. And I know that I joke about that, but Dad was okay with it. Dad was truly a leader. He led by example until his later years when he became the lawn chair foreman. At least we refer to him as the lawn chair foreman. A role he had definitely earned. Dad taught us how to work hard. As one of his two daughters, I often tell friends that Dad didn't let me being a girl get out of hard work, for which I'm grateful. He had Trinity and I working side by side with Jason and Brian no matter what it was. And Dad never sent us to do a task that he couldn't finish himself. And he also sent us to achieve tasks that we could achieve. Dad had a poster in his classroom right above the whiteboard or chalkboard, depending on the year that you were there, that read, "Self-fulfillment begins when self-pity ends. Go for it." Dad lived this saying until his dying day. He never once felt for himself. He just kept going until he couldn't. And finally, my son, Dustin, who is serving overseas, gets credit for reminding me of a saying that I think I shared on Dad's social media. And it's from our favorite movie, The Sandlot, with me and my boys. And it's, "There are heroes and there are legends. Heroes live forever. Legends never die." Dad is my hero. He is truly a legend that will live on in those of us who knew him. As I close, I would like to share one special gift that Dad gave everyone who loved him. And let me tell you, the first time I heard it, I thought he was losing his mind. Dad loved to be told that we loved him, and he always told us the same. So I would ask all of those who know Dad's favorite line, which we've shared, to repeat it back. Fly high, Dad, watch over us always, protect us, and always remember, Grandpa Jay, that we love you. I'm going to repeat that line one time, and I ask that you all reply, all you who have shared that with Grandpa, reply. Here we go. We love you, Grandpa Jay. Thank you.
So we have the musical number now. Unchained Melody by Mass.
backstory on this song. It was his favorite song of all time. And towards the last couple of years, he got a pan flute, and he wanted me to help him learn how to play a G melody on the pan flute. I can't play the pan flute very well, so I chose the other flute. So this one's for Grandpa.
What a wonderful tribute that we've been given today. Wonderful words, wonderful music. When I thought about what to say today, I thought of the scripture found in John chapter 15. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. As we pondered that and apply that scripture to our lives, I think it means that we are to share our time and talents and knowledge and our love with others. Jay did all of those things to leave this life having given everything he possibly could. J. Allen gave us the best gift of all. He gave himself. He gave himself to his family and friends. He gave himself to his church, most recently as a primary teacher, supporting probably the greatest primary teacher ever, his wife Linda. He gave himself to his country, earning an honorable discharge from military service. He gave himself to his community over and over and over again. He taught thousands in school and in Timpanogos Cave. He taught anyone who would listen about American Fort Canyon and its history. He helped countless people as an ambulance driver and a first responder. He even taught us about gardening, tree grafting, and lawn care. George Bernard Shaw said, "This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to the future generations." I can think of no one that applies to better than Jacob. All of us have benefited from knowing him. May we remember all the wonderful, wonderful things that he taught us, is my prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Amen. Our closing hymn will be hymn number 117, "Come Unto Jesus," after which we'll have a closing prayer by David Besant. We will then proceed to the American Fort Cemetery.
I say the prayer, I have to say one thing that Jay's always saying he wants to be buried at Teen's grave, which I knew has been up that trail up to Miller Hill is very steep. A couple months ago, we were able to take him up there. And he reminded me again, I have permission to be buried here. So I don't know if he's going to haunt us for the rest of our lives for that, but I think deep in his heart, he knew he couldn't be, but that was his wish. I'm grateful for that moment time I had to take him up there. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful, Father, for all the many blessings that we have. We're grateful for this time to celebrate this great man's life. We're grateful, Father, for the time that he's spent in his life to impact thousands throughout this community and also throughout the world as he taught them about the Timothy's cave. We're grateful for the knowledge that he has left us. And pray, Father, for the Spirit to be with his family, especially his dear wife and companion, that she may have the strength that she needs and comfort in her life. Bless his children as well. We are grateful again for all the blessings and thankful for all those that have supported the family during this time. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Brothers and sisters, would you please rise? We'd like to invite